What if the reason you keep shrinking under a toxic boss has nothing to do with your ability and everything to do with your brain? What if the emotional exhaustion, the self doubt, the Sunday night dread aren't personality flaws, but neurological responses you can actually rewire? Today's guest, she spent 20 years inside high pressure corporate worlds, including Microsoft, not only surviving toxic leadership, but cracking open the neuroscience behind it. And what she discovered might just change the way you work forever. This is Rosabel Unscripted, where courage meets healing. Whether you're a caregiver, balancing work, a professional, carrying silent workplace trauma, or someone who just ever felt small under the wrong kind of leadership. I'm joined by Shannon Smith. She's former Microsoft leader, neuroscience and psychology driven strategies, and the founder of Brain Hacks by Shannon. She has spent more than 2 decades decode the buyer's brain, transforming how people sell, lead, and protect themselves from toxic bosses. She doesn't just teach strategy, she teaches immunity. Shannon, welcome to Rosabel Unscripted.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Rosabel. I'm honored to be here and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I am so excited to talk with you today. I cannot wait to ask all kinds of questions. Who doesn't want to talk about toxic bosses? We want to vent, right?
Yeah, everybody wants to vent. Everybody has a story. Well, I mean,
Absolutely.
in fact, like just to not to get right to it, but 87%, I think it was a study done by McKinsey or one of the consulting firms, but 87% of the population has experienced a toxic boss at some point in their lives. And a third of those are currently under a toxic boss, not even counting all the other roles of people in your life that could also be toxic. So, we all have, I think, at least one story across our lifetime for sure.
Right. And you said you had a million toxic boss stories, but I wanted to start there actually because again, so many people listening, they have lived that grief, that erosion of confidence. Even myself, I can tell you that. Can you take us back to one of those early moments? Maybe that time you were 20 and perhaps you felt publicly mocked for having that stupid look on your face. What did that experience do to your sense of self at the time?
Yeah. Well, just to give, I guess, a little bit of context. So, I had just been hired for my first big girl job at a boutique consulting firm out of Chicago. I had actually applied to this place, I want to say like 6 times, and they finally let me in. So I'm very excited to be there just to sort of lay the groundwork there. So, my very first day, we're doing the orientation. And for a portion of the first day, one of the highest level executives, the managing director, took us for about an hour, talked with us, sort of talked us through the importance and the values and the missions of the company. And he took us into his office. And in the middle of one of his stories, because I was so engrossed, he was a great storyteller. He just stops and says, "Why do you have that stupid look on your face?" In the Chicagoan accent. And yeah, I was 20 or something around there. And at the time, I had no tools. I'm sure I got beat red. I was so embarrassed. Your whole body just kind of gets hot and tingly, and you feel your heart rate increase, and your palms get sweaty. Mom spaghetti, just kidding. We all, I think, have felt that at some point. I was young, and this guy that I respected so much just pretty much called me stupid. And here I am trying to make a great first impression with this high up executive at the company. That's one. I've got more actually from that company if you would like.
Yeah. We all been there. I got my share of stories as well, Me being born in Colombia and brand new and I didn't know I learned English as I went, to be honest with you.
Nice.
And
Nice.
so my accent wasn't the best at first. And I was in Florida, Alabama. And so people would, oh my God,
Mm,
I can tell you so many stories about that. But I guess we live and learn. You said something very interesting. You didn't have the tools at the time. You were right. What do you do when you don't know what to say? You wish you would be fast to come up with something that will perhaps even leave you somewhat satisfied, meaning like not feeling so stupid, right? Like I could have just said something and then you perhaps ruminate going on home and whatnot. But wow. But what about, I mean, Also, not to mention the humiliation that leaves a mark, especially when you look back now with your neuroscience lens. What do you see happening in the brain of someone navigating that kind of trauma? What do you see?
Yeah. Well, so a lot of things are happening. The amygdala is the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn center. It also has some functionality with pleasure. Most of the brain components do multiple things. It's not just a one role type, but the amygdala is activated. Your insula is firing. When that happens, you experience the palm sweats, the pulse rate, you're anxious, you feel hot, and you don't feel safe. And actually, your brain is able to detect a threat. I think it's on an average of like 200 milliseconds before you're even aware of it. The brain is constantly scanning for threats because that's what it was designed to do way in the way back when. So, whenever you're in this state, you are not able to be strategic. You're not able to be calm. You certainly can't think of some quippy comeback that might save some of the humiliation. So it's very difficult to respond versus react in that state unless, you're a freezer. And at that point, I was a total freezer. I didn't know what to say. So, yeah, that's kind of what's going on in the body and the brain when a threat is activated.
My biggest fear, if I ever gone through that or in the past that I have gone through that, is I was afraid that I would say something actually worse or I would come out with something that would be much harsh, which happened quite often. And then the saddest part was it like everybody will turn. And then somehow I feel I was the villain
Yeah.
for saying something like, "Oh, that went too far." Not that I wanted to, but it's a sense, it's a response. I feel that somebody crossed the line. And so that was my biggest. And so sometimes, even today, you learn how to like, do I respond? Do I just stay? And what do I do? It's not easy.
No,
Wow.
it's not. I mean, and especially as women, and I'm sure, you have a very different experience coming from Colombia and learning the language as a second language or even third or fourth or however many you speak. And it just, it's a delicate balance of how much, if you can get your wits about you, if you can calm down all of the alarm systems that are going off in your brain, how far is too far? What is an assertive answer for a woman that's not over the line? Because, at least in my experience, it's very easy to cross that very blurry line of, well, you're just mean or you're just aggressive. I mean, I haven't been called mean or aggressive, but, it's very difficult to find that line, especially whenever you're in a defensive mode because you're being attacked.
Absolutely. You know what was the worst in my case one time? This was kind of funny though. I didn't know how to act, like I didn't know what to say, what to do. So one time again, me just being brand new in the country and kind of learning from what other people respond. I thought that if I repeat how other people will respond, it will be not knowing. Later on, I learned it depends on the context and the relationship. That did not go well.
Can
That
I
did
hear
not
a
go well for
specific
me.
story? Because, like, what's coming to mind is I don't know if you've seen Coming to America with Eddie Murphy when he's like,
I feel free out.
oh, and he thinks it's a greeting. Like, were you flipping everybody
Yeah.
off?
But it was more like it was this nurse that was having I think she was talking to like an assistant, and I guess they were joking among each other, and so she said, "Be nice, have some respect." She said that, right? And
Huh?
so I kind of like, okay, she talked to her like that. So
Uh,
actually, I think a year or two went by, and I was in a different situation. There's another peer of mine. She did something. She said something not nice. She was like, I was looking for something. She said, how long have you going to be here before you know where things are? And of course, there were other people. There was a patient. It's like, be nice. Have some respect. Like,
yeah.
and that cascade into something else, but we live and learn, now I know
Yeah.
it,
It's a
the
delicate
context.
minefield in the workforce.
It is also the tone, the moment, those things. Some people, depending on who you ask, for example, some people say, hey, you confront the person right there. You tell them if somebody's doing, others say, no, don't do that. Just go to your boss, tell them. And so, which one, it's not easy.
It's
It's
not
not easy
easy.
today.
I
And
think,
then you learn to be avoidant also.
yeah. I mean, that's the safest, to a certain point. And then when they're saying, well, we haven't seen Rosabel in forever. Where is she? Does she still work here? And then it's like this visibility thing. So it is difficult to
Yeah.
navigate without a doubt. There's so many
You know,
landmines.
sometimes sometime I told myself, it's like, I wish I was invisible at work as I am on social media. Like when you post and nobody answers. So some days I want to be invisible. And I make myself sometimes invisible because, again, your mind is being taught that it's better. It's better.
Mhm.
You don't bother anybody. Things are calm. Your mind has been taught that, for example, in my case, even since I'm a little kid, well, Rosabel, you talk too much. You learn like, oh, if I stay quiet, if I stay in my lane here, I don't say I'm not me, which that's not a good thing. We got to be ourselves, right? I'm sure we can talk more about it. But for you, I want you to tell me, when did this became something that not just that you just studied, but something that you used to claim out of these toxic environments?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess before I answer that, I was just going to make a quick comment about the brain and how much we crave certainty. We don't even prefer it. It's something that we crave. And so a lot of
Mm.
times when people don't understand, well, why doesn't she just find another job or why does she not just leave this relationship? The brain needs certainty, even if the certainty is not a great situation. We have a very strong loss aversion. So we're very afraid of losing what we already have, even if there may be a great potential for us to get something better. So the risk and reward is a variable to be considered. Like, even if there's a risk that could turn out well for you and it's reasonably likely to happen, still, so many people have that loss aversion and want to hang on to the current state because that's what they know, it's certain, and that's what the brain craves. I feel like I'm doing like a idiocracy commercial. What the brain craves. Um,
There
Rondo.
isn't a
Just
saying?
kidding.
Isn't there a saying that says something? It's better the devil you know that the good
Mm.
to know, or something like that.
Yeah,
It
the
kind
devil
of
you know. I think that's it.
exactly
I always butcher
something like that.
those.
Yeah,
I get like two
that's
words
how it became
wrong.
right. Well, you know what? In this process, I think it's also important to kind of like, I've learned to laugh at myself. Sometimes
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, because, hey, accept that we're human and that we make mistakes and whatnot. But gosh, how do you immunize yourself against toxic bosses like in real life or everyday life?
So, you know, and if you want to, I can kind of go back to my story of how I even stumbled
I'm
across
so
neuroscience. But basically, there's really sort of three pillars you have to have in place if you're going to be successful at dealing with someone who's toxic. How is your life in general? Are you constantly running from A to B to C, from morning to night? Do you ever give yourself any peace or downtime? Or have you just scheduled every minute of your life so everything is always hectic and your system never really has an opportunity to relax and power down? And so, if you're in that state versus a little bit of self care in there, it's going to be much more difficult to immunize yourself from a toxic boss when you're constantly on the go and high alert and running. And by the way, our bodies and brains are not built to be on that high alert all the time like we are. Even with our phones now, there's like always something that is keeping our attention. And actually, our brains need to have some downtime. It needs to be bored because that's when creativity happens. That's when a lot of times the solutions to problems come to you and they can be solved. So, our brain really does need downtime. So, that's kind of the first pillar. The second pillar is preparation. They say, and I'm going to try to not butcher this phrase, that the battle is won off of the battlefield, in the preparation room. And that's the case here too. So if you study what triggers your toxic boss, is it like a certain time of the year? Maybe it's performance appraisals, or maybe there's like a lot of stress or a big conference or something coming up. Learn what those triggers are so that you can just be more prepared. So, once you have the situations that tend to result in a public humiliation or whatever they're doing, if you cannot leave your job, then some tactics that you can execute. So, it's planning for what's to come, and then it's execution in the moment. And it's a lot more difficult to execute in the moment if you don't really have a plan. So there's several techniques and tactics that you can use whenever you're in the moment where you can prepare to execute them. One is to activate your peripheral vision to kind of see the edges of the room. That way, your cortisol will just naturally drop because you're taking in non threatening stimuli around about the room. And so that can be really helpful in the moment. So you're like, if my boss starts to X, I'm going to start just using my peripheral vision more and more. What that's going to do is it's going to take you out of the moment to where you can be less connected to the emotions that situation evokes in you. So when you're less emotional, whenever your amygdala is less active, you've got your heart rate is down, all of those systems are in check, then you're able to activate that prefrontal cortex, be more rational, and choose to respond versus react. So that's one tactic. There's several more, but yeah.
Wow. So let me ask you this. I know that you also help teams and leaders also sell more effectively using neuroscience. When we talk about that, what are some brain based principles about influence or sales that most people get completely wrong?
Yeah. We'll just say really quickly that there is a lot of overlap between actually maybe I'll just kind of tell the origin story really quick if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So I guess it was the pandemic, that pandemic thing that happened. You probably heard about it. But at the time I was consulting, I was doing a lot of things. I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and we had just bought this very old 65-foot boat, and we were living on Lake Union in Seattle. And the only reason I agreed to buy this boat is because he was going to fix it up and he was going to make it however I wanted because it would be cool to go down the coast in the winter, get away from the Seattle winters. So he was out of town actually flipping a house in a different state when COVID happened in March. And so he got stuck down there. What that meant was I had to figure out all the stupid systems on this old boat, which I did not want to do. I did not want to have to learn these. I did not want to have to do these. Like I was good with my consulting. So here it is, COVID. It's never ending. There's no vaccination in sight. I don't have any help with this boat. Nobody knows how to work this 1950, 65-foot boat. Only the guy that's in, a couple states over. So I'm trying to do my thing. I'm losing power. I have to deal with the black water. I have to deal with the heat. And so with everything, I just started spiraling. Like I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking too much. I was constantly anxious. I was in a very, very dark place. And I eventually came across Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself. And I just instantly got hooked. So from there, I dove deep into peer reviewed scientific journal articles on neuroscience. And what I found was that there are so many bits and bobs in here that could actually help people on a mass scale if it weren't buried in these journals and if it could be applicable to people's lives. So I initially actually started with myself and I created 11 tactics out of the literature and I put myself through it and I felt better. I wasn't as anxious. I was sleeping better. cut back on my drinking. Despite what was going on around me, I was able to find some peace inside. So I said, okay, worked on me. Let's try on some other people. So I got about 30 volunteers, put them through the program. They saw crazy results too. A lot of them just wanted to ultimately lose weight. So then the rewiring of the brain was to think differently about food, the gym. They all saw significant weight loss, healthy eating. I helped one guy with his procrastination. Another guy told me that his anxiety was down 90%. So I made those tactics into a mobile gaming app that's on Apple and Google's. At that point, I went back to sales because I've been in sales for a long time. I started door knocking, selling roofs before the consulting gig, sold shoes on commission, sold gym memberships. So I started to apply it to sales. But just because it's applicable to sales doesn't mean that it can't help in a whole bunch of other areas. And so that's why a lot of these sort of tactics work both for toxic bosses and for sales whenever you have your prospect in front of you, because so much of it is really just regulating your own system. And at least within sales, then it's being able to tune into your prospect, being extremely present with them, active listening, looking for particular micro cues that will give you an indication of if you should back off a topic or if you should double click on a topic. So in essence, a way that you can be more effective in sales is to hone in on your prospect with a regulated nervous system and follow their body language, their facial expressions, their words, their tone, their cadence, all of it. Take all the information and see if there is a significant change in your conversation. And if so, that's probably a point that is important for one reason or another.
I also noticed that you built a strong presence or a brand, a personal brand in LinkedIn. So, what would you say for? I just want to ask you all kinds of questions. See, I'm like jumping all over,
Go for it.
but
That's
as
what
we
we're here
came to
for.
right. So, for listeners that are trying to grow, because I have entrepreneurs and people that are like trying to grow social media and everything, trying to grow on that platform, especially for women, caregivers, or even new leaders or those who are starting to become leaders. What is the brain science behind visibility and trust?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot. I'll just maybe call out a few. So, one of the first things that I talk to my clients about is getting inside of their customer's brain by putting themselves there, understanding what is the big problem that they want solving and what is the outcome they want. Because ultimately, when someone decides to hire you or not, they're really saying, can Rosabel give me the result I want? Can she solve my problem? And if you can demonstrate that you understand their problem very well, then you've already won half the battle because they know that you get it. So the subtext is important, and that subtext goes into everything you do. It goes into every piece of content, your profile, how you talk to your customers, how you talk to your prospects, how you DM, if you have funnels, if you have a newsletter. So once you get the right subtext, it's important to reinforce and validate it and use that language, because that kind of language and those words will get through the reticular activating system, the RAS filter, because there is so much noise on LinkedIn. And so it's very difficult to get anybody's attention. I heard someone say that attention is the new gold. And so it's very difficult to break through to, especially if you're looking at B2B and you're trying to get a high up decision maker engaged. You've got to break through that RAS filter so that you can start the conversation. So each and every time that you reach out to somebody, the goal is only just to get to the next conversation. And there's different sort of tactics that you would use throughout that. It just kind of depends on where you are in the sales process. But it's a couple examples, and especially on LinkedIn. I'll say just really
Yes, definitely.
quickly too, it is not too late. The posts are still gaining engagement and impressions week after. I post it. So that just means that there's still not enough content. Otherwise, they wouldn't be recycling like that. If you post on Instagram, you don't see that. So they still need content creators on LinkedIn. So don't think it's too late. It is a great platform to establish a personal brand because ultimately, if you have a good personal brand, you can have immediate sales for any business you want to start, support, or invest in. So it is a lot of hard work, but ultimately, especially if you're wanting to have your own business or be an entrepreneur, it is a worthy endeavor.
Absolutely. And going back to the toxic bosses again, what about for anyone out there listening, someone who's stuck under a toxic boss, of course, maybe crying in parking lots like I used to do,
Mm.
maybe doubting their worth. What would you like for them to know about their power, their brain, their path moving forward?
Yeah. First and foremost, making a quick note, we are on this earth for, insert reason. Some say that we're on this planet to learn a lot, to evolve. And ultimately, adversity will evolve you, it will make you more resilient. So, the first sort of part of the decision tree is, do I want to stay for this? I mean, the answer can be no, but there's a quote out there that says, life is happening for you, not to you. And so having that different perspective coming into a sort of toxic boss situation, what am I going to learn from this? How am I going to grow? How am I going to evolve from this? Is a way to think about it. But you may also be like, you know what? This is too much. I am out of here. And that's totally your right as well. If you're in a situation where you can't just leave, know that you can find that calmness and peace within you no matter what is going on around you. And your brain is really the secret behind that. It's your secret sauce. You can use it for good or for evil. And just knowing that you can do that first and foremost, and then some of the tactics I'm happy to shoot out too, you really do have a lot more power than you think. So you may be staying in the job with the toxic boss, but if you use your brain properly, you're not going to be as impacted by it. So you're still going to have a toxic boss, but maybe you're not crying in your car. Maybe you don't feel so sick coming in on Sunday night before. So really the
Right.
TLDR is you've got all of the power already. It's just the awareness and then figuring out how to use it.
And it could be just, we say toxic bosses, but it could be a toxic coworker or whatever. And in my case, for example, one of the things I've learned is I believe this very much. We have no power over to change other people, right? But we do have
Yeah.
control over what we do, how we react, and when we change. A couple of things I've done for myself is I have changed my environment. For example, if I needed to change my office location, that made a difference. If I need to go to a quieter place, if I needed to, do certain things, but it's all again learning to seek that peace. What the environment, fix your own environment, whatever makes you, yourself better than anyone else. And so, whatever you think is best for like you say, it is good that you also mention you're not telling people, oh, well, you have to stay in your job because, like, oh, you got to be strong, and that's fine, right?
Yeah.
It's whatever works for you and your circumstances. And it's also good when you go to someone, they
Mhm.
listen to your circumstances because it's easy to say when you're removed from the situation and you really don't know how that person feels. I've been there. I've been in those circumstances. And sometimes, especially as women, like when I
Yeah.
tell my husband, we don't necessarily looking for answers. We just want someone to listen to us. And it's so funny because today I might be complaining about it, but the next day I get up and go to work.
Yeah. Like at
So
20, I was willing to endure that. Like that was the first day. And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a ride. Now at my age, I'd be like, no. And just, get up and leave.
I think I was a little bit the opposite. It was my husband, he was in the military for 20 years and he
Oh,
only held 2 jobs in his entire life.
wow.
And so I am so glad 3 years ago he retired and he finally got to experience what is to work in the civilian world. He doesn't say a thing to me anymore. He was like, "Oh, so this
Wow.
is what it's like." Yep. Welcome to the world. Because he always was like, "I've always had a job." It's a complete different world how they do things out there. It's like, I don't know what you call it, organized chaos or whatever. And now he's on it. So he understands now. He now
Yeah.
understands me and I'm thankful for it. I think we should all experience a little bit of everything. But what does grace look to you for you today? After 20 years plus years in corporate, after the battles, the breakthroughs, the neuroscience, the wins. What is grace like for you?
You mean like grace whenever a toxic boss is coming at you? What does that look like? Well, certainly responding instead of reacting. And when you do respond to a toxic boss, do it thoughtfully, do it deliberately, carefully, taking the pause before you say the next thing. Usually, toxic bosses tend to be sort of up here with their tone or energy and trying to sort of de escalate, coming back down. And it could also just be that grace is that, if they are disrespecting you so much, just leaving the situation too and just not even partaking
Engaging.
could be an option as well. So, those are some examples.
Shannon, is there anything I have not asked you that you're like, I really need to get that out there? I need to tell the audience that.
Actually, I think we covered it all. Nothing else
I just want to
outside of
thank you.
just take your power back. You got it.
That is awesome. So I just want to thank you for the work that you do by giving people the tools, not just to survive the toxic leadership, which is in abundance, we have to be honest,
Yep.
but also to take back their power, to reclaim their voice, their confidence, and their mental well being. That is just so necessary in this day and age. To everyone out there listening, how can they connect with you, Shannon?
Sure. Well, I have a couple things going on. You can always find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I look at those pretty regularly. brainhacksbyshannon.com. You can find me there. Starting to plan out my speaking engagements for next year, or if there's a podcast that you'd like me on. Also, a couple weeks ago with my business partner, we just launched Sales Sage, which is an agentic AI model that helps uncover issues under the surface that sales reps may not tell you about. So it's kind of shoring up that truth gap. If you're interested, you can go to salesage.co for that. Or if you just want some help with your sales, your branding, or if you want your sales teams to be better, all of those things I can help
That's
you with.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, people. Go show Shannon some love, reach out, let her know what part of today's episode resonated with you the most. And I just want to, as we close today, I want to leave you with this. Sometimes the hardest part isn't the toxic boss, like we were talking, it's also the version of yourself that's becoming or trying to survive them. The shrinking, the over explaining, the apologizing, which I am very guilty of. I'm very intentional lately. When I hear people back say, you don't have to apologize, it's like, oh, I did it again. Because we're like, I apologize
Yeah.
for just what? For what? For existing?
For
Today's
existing.
conversation, I think exactly. It reminds us that our brains, they're not fixed, they're adaptable. You can rewire them, and it's a constant process, You just have to learn how to respond to those new truths. So, what I will say is ask yourself, where can I replace fear with clarity? Where can I replace shame with understanding? When can I reclaim the parts of me that I gave away because I wanted to stay safe? At the end of the day, healing is not about pretending that something didn't hurt. It's about remembering that you deserve better and choosing the environments that honor your brilliance. So take the truth with you today and always thank you for being here. See you next time. Stay unscripted. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.